Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video.
I'm female, 23. My brother, Jonah, male, 18, has always been the golden child of the family, and in my parents' eyes can do no wrong. Due to this constant favoritism, I had to become independent really fast and work my ass off since the age of 16, while also pulling the majority of the weight when it came to chores and household work. If I ever wanted anything, I would have to save up for it, and my parents never gave me a single cent. I wouldn't be salty about this if this treatment was equal or if we were in a tough spot financially, but it simply boiled down to my parents constantly spending their money on my brother instead of helping out both their children. I can give hundreds of examples, but there are a few to keep in mind before I tell you about the straw that broke the camel's back. For example, when I turned 16, I had to get myself a used Kia after working at a fast food joint for ages, as my mom said it would help me build character. Sure, I learned how to budget, but I was resentful when my brother turned 16 because dad took him personally to a used car dealership and bought him a used Mustang. He ended up crashing it just 4 months later, and my parents did nothing more than slap him on the wrist and even paid to repair the car. Another thing was my room. When Jonah was about 10 years old, he lived in the smaller room in the house. Admittedly, it had a lot more toys and games than anything I had ever grown up with, but it was still smaller. Well, after a point, my parents suggested that I should move into the smaller room as I had less stuff and because Jonah is a growing boy. My dad even threw in some casual sexism and said all I needed to accessorize my room was a dressing table and a wardrobe. Like, ugh. I was into music at this time and had a beat up Squire and an amp in my room, but there wouldn't be any space for it anymore. I fought them on this decision and used all of my angsty teenage power, but it didn't work. Mom would just guilt trip me, and Dad would use the "You're living here rent free, miss" line on me. I ended up selling my guitar gear to a friend of mine and moving into the shittier room where I only lived for 3 years before moving out. I wonder why. Jonah at that time got a flat screen in his room and brought in a PlayStation, got our parents to chip in for a gaming PC, and does nothing except the bare minimum. Yeah, he's not a junkie or a gang member, but all he does is barely pass school, has zero interest in the things my parents pushed him to do, and just plays games and hangs out with his friends all day. The money they've spent on his football classes were wasted. When did he decide he wanted to learn to horse ride and give up after a year? That money is gone too. I wasn't a genius or anything, but used to work hard and had won a few competitions with my band, all the while maintaining above average grades. I mean, it's sick that I even have to compare like this, but it was just unfair in my eyes. All my achievements got from mom were a lack of interest and actual humiliation from dad, who thought that playing in a rock band wasn't ladylike of me. As I mentioned before, I left the house as soon as I turned 18, and nobody in my family was beaten up about it. That is, they weren't until they realized how much work I used to do around the house and called me begging me to come back. I said that I wasn't interested and they needed to retrospect and realize how much damage they'd done to me. I had saved up and was already working by this point, so I was sustaining myself comfortably. A year passed by when neither of us was willing to compromise until one day my mom called me and said that she understood her mistake and wanted to make amends with me. I met mom, dad, and Jonah that day, and things seemed to improve. My parents even chipped in to get me through college, something which I simply couldn't consider earlier. I was grateful to them, and my life took an upturn as I began dating my current fiance, Neil, at this time. Overall, things were looking up, and my relationship with my parents had also improved a fair bit. After graduating, Neil and I moved in together, and he proposed. I was super excited, and both of us began to plan for the wedding together. Since we were just starting in our careers and didn't have a lot of money to throw around, we were keeping things simple. And Neil's parents also graciously offered to chip in what they could. My parents also asked if I needed help, and I told them that I had my eye on a perfect wedding dress, but it was quite expensive. I could cover most things within budget, but the dress was one out of reach item my heart just couldn't let go of. So I opened up to my parents about it, and they graciously agreed to pay for it. This was 2 years ago, as Neil proposed when I was 21. After that, both our careers got demanding, due to which we put our engagement on hold. At the age of 23, we're both making a decent amount more than we did before, and now we're finally ready to have our dream wedding, with no compromises. However, even now, that dress was a bit of a stretch. I could rest easy knowing that my parents would pay for it, though. That is, until Jonah's 18th birthday bash came by. With our wedding set for August and Jonah's birthday in January, there was a big gap between these two events, and no matter how much my parents splurged on his party, they should still have been okay to help out with the dress, or so I thought. This absolute maniac not only demands a birthday at a five-star resort in Cabo, but also wants to call 15 of his school buddies, his girlfriend, and our cousins for the trip. Not me, by the way. All of which had to be financed by our parents. When it comes to Jonah, man, they're just pushovers. My mom handed over her credit card to Jonah and said that he could enjoy himself. Well, he did. About $80,000 worth of enjoyment. When the bill came through to my parents, they were shocked. For the first time in my life, I heard that they actually scolded Jonah. But it was still super mild. They paid off the credit card and told Jonah that he had to give back half, that is 40 grand. Dad called me after this and asked if he could borrow money as a lot of his savings weren't liquid and bills needed to be paid. With a sick feeling in my stomach, I said I would oblige, but also mentioned, Dad, does this mean that I won't get that dress? I was already nervous, and his response made me feel really bad. He told me that it was unfair to bring that up as they were dealing with a family emergency, and I was acting entitled. This was the last straw. I wasn't willing to be close to people who only thought of me as a second priority and only reached out to me to dig them out of a hole they created. Ha ha, I'm super proud of the way I responded next. I said, well, you can use the money you save by not buying the dress to pay off the debts, right? Even better, don't bother coming for the wedding. I'm sure you don't want to pay to travel to the venue either, right? And hung up. My phone blew up after this, but I refused to respond. Instead, I went to Neil and told him that I didn't want my parents or Jonah at the wedding. He was already aware of the situation Jonah's birthday had created, but this was the last straw. He said that I was completely in the right, and I felt pretty secure in my decision. However, the day after this, my mom posted a picture on social media of their house with the electricity cut off, where she blamed me for not sending money in such a dire situation. She also went on a long emotional rant about not getting to see her daughter's wedding. My whole family's shit-talking me in the comments, and I mean, I could have sent over the money at the very least because this means that their basic living situation is going to be super crappy until they sort things out. Did I go too far? Update 1. For everyone telling me to go NC with my entire family right away, chill. I did act rashly, and all I'm trying to figure out now is whether what I did was justified or not. I am leaning towards cutting off contact with my family after what happened after I posted this, though. Jonah dared to call me and pretend like he was on my side. This irresponsible prick, who's the reason everything is haywire, is taking the moral high ground over our parents. He said that it was unfair for me to have to pay them, and they shouldn't have told him that he could have a free pass. I mean, he made himself a victim, putting himself next to me. I said that he needed to grow the frick up and help out around the house, at least enough to cover the bills. He said that he's only 18, and that's unfair on him. So then, where does he expect the money to come from? This kid is so sheltered that I can't even... Anyhow, as of now, I told him to go back to Mom and Dad and tell them that I won't be giving them anything. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more ways I find for Jonah to help. Hell, I mean, He could sell half the toys and gadgets he has, and that would be enough for a few months' worth of utilities. Update 2. I have decided to stop talking to my family and have completely cut them off, including most of my extended family. Mom and dad have presented such a skewed story to everyone, and they completely refuse to listen to me anytime I explain my side of the story. Apart from my grandma and a few cousins, I don't want to talk to anybody else. Honestly, there was no way forward except to make things more and more toxic. It's a tough thing to do, and I'm getting a little overwhelmed with the wedding as well, but it had to be done. I didn't want to be like this, but it seems like the best way forward. As for Jonah and my parents, they're being completely unreasonable, and I honestly don't even consider them my family after the shit show they've created. A lot of friction is there between mom, dad, and Jonah right now due to the money problem, but they're still not willing to give their golden child the reality check he needs. Update 3. Guys, Neil is so sweet. I swear this man is amazing. I don't need to drop this update, but I wanted to tell you all since you're so invested. Neil got me the dress I wanted all this time. Apparently, he had been saving ever since I told him about what Jonah did, and he also helped me find my independence when I was struggling with going NC with my family. I have realized I was giving them too much space in my life and being a bit of a pushover in my teen years, and that's helped me move forwards. It's also been a little easier since a lot of people who had a knee-jerk reaction against me have come to my side after pressuring my parents for explanations that didn't stick. NTA, OP, it's not your job to clean up after your parents get what's coming to them by raising a monster child. NTA, your brother is ridiculously entitled, and your parents are actively responsible for their financial ruin. It's as simple as that. Next story. I'm a high school teacher in the US who has ADHD myself. I wasn't diagnosed until college and want to preface this by saying I'm not perfect. For example, I have lost students' papers before. The issue at hand happened in my 10th grade class where the kids are 15 to 16 years old. I've always taken off points for essays, projects, and homework assignments turned in late. I explained this on day one and put it on the syllabus. They lose 10% for each day it's late, but I never take off more than 50% as late penalty. Usually, kids won't turn in major projects more than 1 to 2 days late. This year, I had a student with ADHD turn in an essay 6 weeks late. They did an excellent job, but I only gave them a 50% because of how late it was. The second essay counted for 30% of their grade for the quarter. However, the student's second essay lost 40% right off the bat for being 4 class days late. About 2 weeks had passed due to the fact my class doesn't meet every day, weekend, and school holidays. This essay didn't do a good job like the first one, but it was a different style of writing. For the first essay, their excuse was that it was done, but they felt like they half-assed it and wanted to do it right. It went above and beyond and was far longer than it needed to be. I explained I prefer they turn something in on time rather than exceed expectations, but turning it in 6 weeks late. The only explanation for the second essay was that they had it saved on a specific computer at home that they didn't have access to. Their previous English teacher never really had much of a penalty for late work. This student typically is an A student, but they finished the first quarter of my class with a 67 or 68, and I bumped them up to a 69.5 because I pitied them and it would raise them to a C minus. The student was argumentative about their grade and angry with me, saying it wasn't fair. In my defense, they could still earn an A for the course, but they would essentially have to maintain around a 95% average for the rest of the course, including the midterm and final exams. College is so expensive in the US, and I don't want to affect students' averages over an assignment because a few days late, but I also feel like I'm not truly preparing students for college, university, the workforce by letting them turn in work when it's convenient with them without consequence. So AITA for sticking to my policy and not boosting her grade? Edit. People keep asking about IEPs and accommodation plans. I work at a private school that offers very limited accommodations, and we have no special ed department. We do not offer extended time on long assignments. We will only chunk them into smaller, more manageable pieces. We only offer extended time for quizzes, tests. Despite parents being aware of ADHD, I realize this student has no file, so I will definitely be talking to the guidance counselor. Even though my school doesn't offer extended time, having an IEP on file for when the student goes to college will serve them well. Second edit. I also give class time. They usually get around 2 to 3 hours of class time to write, ask me questions, and do peer revisions. Some of them waste their time by talking or going on their phones. I tell them I'm not going to get into arguments if they want to waste their time, but that I'm always there to provide any help and support while they work. Usually, I have a constant line of kids asking for help, so I can't dedicate time to focus and observe this one specific student's work habits because then I tell the three other kids, all asking for help on their essays, to hold on. And by that time, the line of students asking for my help will have possibly increased to 5. Third edit. I did contact the parents after the first missing essay, and the admin knows they got a C minus due to late work. I tell students to talk to me before the due date to make arrangements on late work. I'm pretty lenient if we come up with a plan ahead of time. I tell them, don't tell me the day it's due unless it's something serious like a death, hospitalization, car accident, etc. For example, a student recently failed a quiz. I followed up and the student broke down saying it was due to family problems at home. I let them complete corrections to raise their F to a C on the quiz. Fourth edit. Yes, I've spoken to the student. I reminded them in person and by email, but they would ignore me and say, I'll do it. After the second essay was 2 to 3 days late, I finally forced them to discuss this in more detail where I explained the policy, why I have it, and how it affects their grade. They seemed pretty receptive until I pulled them aside the following week to discuss why they only earned a C minus for the first quarter. They thought it would all balance out because they got A's on the quizzes and were quite upset with me when that didn't happen. Parents were already informed after the first missing essay, but we have a parent-teacher conference scheduled. NTA, we aren't talking about a class period or two. We're talking about 6 weeks to first time and 4 weeks to second. ADHD is fairly common, and lots of kids with ADHD manage to get their assignments in on time or only a little late. But 6 weeks? No. There's accommodation and then there's no accountability. What's the point of a deadline if you don't actually adhere to it? NTA, ADHD could explain a little, but it doesn't fully explain why the papers were as late as they were. I suspect one of those papers was written by someone other than your student. As you say, the two papers had different styles of writing. I suggest you keep reminding the student of the due dates of any future assignments and that you will accept no excuses, other than death or hospitalization, for the assignments being late. Maybe it's time to really think about whether the policy makes sense in the first place. Grades are basically the only stick you have, so you're using it to punish late work, but aren't grades supposed to reflect the degree to which students mastered the coursework? This kid eventually turned in great work, so the lowered grades really just are punitive and don't reflect her mastery of the subject. Obviously, it's important for students to learn how to deal with deadlines too, ADHD or not. But maybe grades aren't the right way to do that. Is there some other sort of disincentive you could use to penalize kids for late work? Also, I get how many students you must have, but it's part of your job to make sure that students with disabilities get the help they need, not just a penalty to motivate them, especially if motivation isn't the problem. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.